This is F.D. Recovery, where we interview addicts and alcoholics.
Our aim is that through this podcast, we might help you on your journey of recovery.
Thank you for listening. Hello, this is Frank with F.D. Recovery.
And this is Dave.
We got Dave in the house. So this portion is the weekly intention. We missed yesterday, so sorry if you went to go tune in and it wasn't updated. But we're recording it today.
Today's the day.
Today is the day. So the way this traditionally works is we choose a topic, our spiritual principle, and we follow it week to week and try to make corrections where we can and then talk about that experience back here for the following week. But this week, we're going to choose a topic of pride and ego.
Oh, boy.
Uh-oh. Run and hide.
Is anyone stuck in pride or ego?
The better question is who isn't? Yeah,
Right.
That's the shorter list.
Right.
So before we dive into that, let's jump into last week's, which was responsibility. We'll keep it brief because we gotta be mindful of the time. So responsibility. Well, I talked about it a little bit last week. There's responsibility and accountability, and the way they differ is responsibility is kind of the duty that you have to your family, you, and your recovery, whether it be job. There's a lot of responsibilities that we have to show up for and be present, and accountability is when you don't do those responsibilities. That's the portion we become accountable and get held accountable. Or in a job fashion, kind of like a write-up or, those kind of things, right? We all got tasks we have. I know I got tasks that I have to do to keep my spiritual health in balance, right? So that being said, what about you? How did responsibility work in your life?
Whoa.
That's a
loaded
one.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, it's before I got clean, my responsibility was mostly to my addiction, the drugs, the alcohol, the dealing of drugs and stuff like that. But when things changed for me, there was something that stood out to me more than anything was the responsibility creed. That when anyone anywhere reaches out for help, I want the hand of AA to always be there. And for that, I am responsible. And that really made me look at how responsible I had been in my life.
That's true, yeah.
I wasn't very responsible. So I wanted to be responsible because I've seen responsibility in other people. And I was like, it was attractive. And so I wanted more of that. So it took time to learn what it's like to be responsible, to show up when I say I'm going to show up, to call someone back when I say I'm going to call them back, which still I fail at, I get a lot of phone calls. Hey, I'll call you back, right? And I'm a lot more aware of it now, where before I was just like, hey, I'll call you back, and I'd, forget about it.
Yeah.
But being responsible is something I'm constantly striving to be more responsible.
Yeah. I think there's a correlation between, when you get your spiritual health involved with some of these spiritual principles, right? You notice you start showing up in those ways that people start putting more tasks on your plate because they trust you a little bit more. Right. And as before, they realize, at least for me, like, well, why would I give this dude that task? He's just going to fuck it up. Right. It's like the only real trust that was out there that I've ran into, which was, when they'd front me to go work, here's a couple 8 balls or to go work. And that was about the extent of the trust. And that quickly got snuffed out when I came back with no money.
Right?
Or very little of it, or maybe got arrested and they got burnt. So the reality was You know, I couldn't be trusted or really responsible for even as something as small as, you know, in that world, it's just like, oh, you're just going to use all my drugs or probably get arrested and it's going to get confiscated anyway. So why would I trust you? You know? So, but that's like a prerequisite of what I had to learn in recovery. It was just like, cause you're totally right with that whole, my responsibility was only to getting high, and I wasn't even good at that. Right. There was plenty of times where
We've heard.
Because I didn't know how to behave when I was high, so I wasn't any good at it.
Right.
You know, so. But well, for real, man. That's just my dad especially. He would never trust me with anything, whether yard work. He's just like, I'll just fucking do it myself. Because no matter what it was, I was trying to escape some responsibility because I didn't want that on my plate. I'm trying to either get loaded or be lazy. And, you know, those two are like synonymous, right? It looked like I was doing a lot, but I'm just spinning in circles.
Accountability to no one.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. That's what bringing this whole piece together is like. You don't really think about responsibility until you come from that world. And because most people are just like, duh, you're supposed to have a job. Duh, you're supposed to have a car. Duh, you're supposed to get an oil change. Duh, you're supposed to not smoke crank and shoot it up. What? These are exactly.
What are you talking about?
But for people that come from our world, it's a much different thing. It's because we've been escaping it our whole life. Whether we had workable jobs and that paid, that wasn't the point. We misuse it, and any kind of real responsibility that got real, we totally dodge it. Or, you know, at least I know I did. So.
Me too.
Every now and then I'd have it going on in my addiction, where I could fake it for a decent amount of time, but realistically it was just wait till I was getting arrested again and start that whole fake recovery, you know, because you would just pretend until you can wait for a moment to get high again, or they stop testing you for a little bit, and then, you know, so. That's the responsibility that I was familiar with, right? Yeah. And you know, switching gears, and this is totally this totally connects to pride and ego, right? Yeah. Like when it comes down to it, with a lot of this stuff that was a stepping stone to learn how to be responsible, loving, spiritual, have a life, have a job. Like that pride and ego factor of it wouldn't let me get past that point, because it takes a lot of breaking through that pride and ego. I mean, big time. Yeah. You got your book out. You look pretty legit. You got the book of AA. So let's hear what you have to say, because I mentioned pride and ego, and you busted out the big book.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, there's something that stood out to me. You know, I'm a big book thumper.
What?
I don't really want to call it a thumper, because that people assume that you know, I'm going to get beat over the head with a book.
Yeah, some of the sponsees you have to.
I just happen to be a big book enthusiast.
Yeah, we'll call it that. Sounds prettier.
Yeah, well, it's because, you know, I mean, I followed the directions, and the directions have changed my life.
Yeah.
Something that stood out to me right away was, you know, that in the chapter 2, there is a solution. It says that almost none of us likes the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, and the confession of our shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. So if something's being required, that means I have to really look at what needs to be required, the ingredients.
Yeah.
Right? The self-searching, I need to do some deep inventory and look at what makes me tick, right? And what it really came down to was pride, okay? Self-centered pride.
Oh, yeah.
And it says the leveling of our pride. So how do I level that pride, you know? I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
You know? I just found following directions other than my own worked.
Imagine that.
You know?
Well, before we dive into that, let's actually read, because I like to start off with Almighty Google letting us know.
Almighty Google. What is the definition of pride?
So I'm going to look up ego and then pride. So,
well, ego is In everyday language,
Yeah.
ego generally refers to a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance, often implying an inflated or exaggerated sense of one's own worth. Wow.
Imagine that. So what we get is the self-perception, right?
Yeah.
Usually we participate in that thing or that situation pretty unhealthy when it comes to addicts and alcoholics, because there is such thing as a healthy ego aspect, the way you look at yourself, right? But we seem to, or at least I'll speak in I statements. I seem to usually partake in those scenarios unhealthy, right? It's all about me, myself. I'm more important than you. That's how my self-importance kind of. It's never did I go, all right, I know who I am. I'm going to just do my best. I mean, that's how kind of a healthy ego, in a sense, would sound to me. Like, all right, I'm just going to do my best, be aligned with my core values, having a normal view of yourself and a modest approach to it, right? But no, mine goes, man, I'm better than any motherfucker here. And at the same time have that inferiority complex that they talk about in the book, the egomaniac, and with the inferiority complex, having both of those kind of pendulum, you're just like, dude, what is this guy doing, right?
Yeah.
So that being said, let's hear what they say about pride. So pride, a feeling of deep pleasure or satisfaction derived from one's own accomplishments, the achievements of those with whom one is closely associated, or from qualities or possessions that are widely admired. Consciousness of one's own dignity. Imagine that, right? So pride is not necessarily inherently negative, right?
Right.
It's when you are in these unhealthy states somehow, because that didn't sound negative at all. It's important to be, where you're at, your accomplishments, and there's, but the way I participate in it, those I statements, right? They're important,
Right?
I like to go. And the funny thing is pride would show up for me in these ways of, like I did nothing, I achieved nothing, and somehow
You accomplished nothing.
exactly.
But you got loaded.
Yeah. But somehow I was talking like I was a valedictorian of my class, and
You're a valedictorian of hanging out in that car that's burnt out in front of a burnt out house, loaded, and can't even drive away.
like I'm about to be I'm about to be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. That's the way I behaved. Like I was just God's gift to earth. Like I've accomplished so much.
Yeah.
But that's what we go to false pride, right? That's where that false pride comes in. It's like, wow, like I'm giving myself praise and living in this self-importance. And you're just like, dude, you've done nothing, bro. But, that's the important thing and why we, the topic, because when you're in recovery, you have to check your pride and ego constantly. Whether you're a woman or a man out there, you have to check your pride and ego, right? And that's a constant correction, And living in that step 10 is probably the most important thing. You got to check your motives and, check, who you're screwing over, right? So were you going to read something out of that, or do you just have that out for show?
I just pulled out pulled up false pride.
Ooh,
right?
That's a good one.
And it says false pride linked to narcissism and shame.
Ooh. Damn, I wouldn't even make that connection. Shame? Does it elaborate?
It is a fear-based ego that can be destructive if it involves taking pride in hurting others.
Oh.
It can lead to overambitious goals and failure due to impaired judgment. Was your judgment ever impaired?
Judge, no. No, it was not, Judge. Your Honor? Your Honor, I don't think it's ever been impaired. All rise.
Right. And then there's healthy pride associated with positive traits like agreeableness, extroversion, and conscientiousness.
Ooh, that's a big word right there.
It's a big word. It is an accurate assessment of one's abilities and involves taking pride in hard work, accomplishment, and treating others well. Yeah. So there's
Imagine
healthy
that.
fears, there's healthy pride and false pride.
Yeah.
Most of the stuff that we live in is false pride.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, I had to battle that the last couple days, you know, like I mentioned you, I won't get too in people's business, just my own, behaving in a certain way where I bring paranoia about, right? You know, especially with my significant other, just unreasonable expectations, right? And living in that, processing through it, like, you know, and talking to her today, you know, yesterday we kind of, you know, didn't see eye to eye. So one thing I learned is when she's in a certain state, I'm in a certain state, and let's talk later, right?
Right.
I've learned that for me, that works best because me, I love to get fucking physically violent. That's my history, right? I wouldn't say love, you know, but you get what I'm saying. There's a lot of anger and passion when it comes into scenarios like that. That's where I was just like, no, you know, let's just put this off.
It used to be your go-to.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
And it's because, you know, all that was the false pride, right? Jumping up to how I think you wronged me, and getting to those pivotal points in my recovery where it's like, okay, I gotta do this differently. There's gonna be problems. There's gonna be mistakes I'm gonna make, but being able to like not create more wreckage. You know, I made a mistake, said something that was a little offhand, and compared to what it was in the past, without minimizing it, it's like, man, I gotta be mindful of my progress too. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, that wasn't as bad as what I used to be, but let's still fix it. Let's still get to that point where we can overcome this. And we had a talk this morning, and we smoothed it out, right, as much as we can, right? And we're like, because I got family coming over here today, and I was like, we don't want that in the air, but just trying to get past that pride and ego, because she's working with hers, I'm working with mine, right? Mm-hmm. And trying to meet them in the middle where we can be like, hey, what's the final goal here? We're teammates. In the end, we're still going to probably be together, because this is not enough to do something, like to break us up, you know, as a team. Right. So in the end, like, it's just like, okay, you know, and I have a hard time opening up when I feel like I'm going to get angry. And that's one thing, my coping mechanism, because before it was just off the handle, flying out. So I'm noticing very recent, like within the last 2 days, I'll shut down a little bit because I don't want to get angry. And I'm like, okay, well, I got to address that. And although it is best for the situation at hand, I know it's not healthiest that I can approach it, right? And I'm kind of coming to conclusions like the last couple of days where I'm just like, so handling that, because that's why I was like, man, ego, when I was on the phone with you and I was like, hey, you want to join the weekly intention ego? Because I was just in it the last 2 days, right? And I'm like, So that being said, right, you got anything you wanted to add on that, right? To sprinkle it on there for me.
I was just looking up what is an example of false pride. False or unhealthy pride is destructive when you're proud of doing something that hurts others.
Ooh.
With false pride, it is pure ego. A person might be proud of being lazy, stubborn, or even bullying and hurting others. So it goes on to say that there's 4 types of pride: moral, self-righteous, correct doctrine, achievement, and independent spirit. Let's talk a little bit about the moral, self-righteous pride.
Oh, yeah. I know all about that one.
Yeah, we both got a little experience with that. But I think what happens in situations like that, it leads us to judgment.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden, I'm better than you. Now I get the opportunity to judge you.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel? Not very good.
No, yeah. Very small.
How does that make me feel? This big.
Yeah.
Right? And so now we're not on a level playing field, right? And there can't be any unity that way. There's no growth that way. Mm-hmm. And we got corrective doctrine. Let's see what this says. This type of pride is characterized by an overemphasis on one's own understanding of religious or philosophical doctrines.
Mm.
Right? I'm right. You're wrong.
Almost like weaponizing something that was meant to be good, like scripture or information. And I can say I've used that in the past, whether it be philosophy or, different techniques of healing or spirituality I've been involved in. And it's just like, well, I'm correct. This is by the book. I've definitely been, I've participated in that for sure.
I have too.
Yeah.
I have too. I think what really keeps me in line on this is it's in the spiritual experience in the back of the big book on page 568. And it says that most emphatically we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing our problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts.
Mm.
I don't know what's going to work for you. I have to allow you that room for growth.
Yeah.
Right. And when someone comes to me and says, "Well, this is how it is," it's like, okay. I have to be open to whatever information is coming in.
Yeah, makes sense.
It doesn't matter what walk of life, what religion, what spiritual practice. It doesn't matter. I need to be open to it. Then it takes me out of that judgment, right? And let's face it, we judge people. We're human beings, and that's where pride comes in. Is if I feel I'm in a position that I can judge you, that's pride.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it like that. That unnatural playing field, right? When you talk about meeting someone where they're at, if I'm constantly, because I do that a lot. Because one thing that I've learned is, right, when you're and how do I say this correctly is, because I've done a lot of work with myself, and I pride myself on, showing up for myself, whether in the gym, whether it's my meetings, whether it's, the people that are in my life, right? And, trying to not put myself in, because then when I see somebody coming in that's not doing that work that I am, it's just like I like to put myself in this prideful state where I'm like, well, I'm killing it because, getting myself in that judgment, right? And I constantly, it's important to kind of, for me, it's like the conflict's important too, right? The conflict of dealing with that and overcoming it is also the treasure as well, right? So it's like I'm not trying to avoid it. It's going to come naturally, but overcoming it is also part of the prize too. It's like, here I had these shitty thoughts and I had these shitty behaviors, but now I've overcome it, right? And then you go on to the next layer of the onion.
For that given moment anyways.
Exactly. So, I mean, repeating the same thing over and over is not too smart, right?
Yeah,
but
it's not real brilliant.
So, but the conflict point, because, it's I think it's, for me, like when we're going back to the situation I was dealing with, is I realizing when it comes to my significant other is I'm shutting down because of the conflict. And in every area of other in my life, I don't do that, if that makes sense. I think what happened, what's going on, and I'm still piecing it together, right, is no matter what, work, relationships, I'm always open to conflict, and healthy conflict resolution, all this. But when it's coming to my significant other, I think it's changing because I've done so much poor choices in that arena that I'm kind of like, ooh, I'm real hesitant, right? Because I don't want to make another mistake. And it's just like that. I think that's where I'm at right now with the whole pride and ego, and especially with that. So,
yeah, that's a challenging one. Here's another one: is achievement. Pride in one's achievements is a common and often healthy form of pride, but it can become problematic when it leads to arrogance or a sense of entitlement.
Did you just say Americans?
Yeah. Right?
No. No, I mean, we're so blessed to be where we're from, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, every place has its bad, good, and all that. But you know, being fortunate, we're very fortunate. I know I'm fortunate. I've been to other countries. We're very fortunate here.
Oh yeah.
We're very, very
yeah.
fortunate. All we're not talking about politically, everything, none of that. We're talking about where we're at, laws, the protection we have with cops. Most of them aren't corrupt. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of that out there, but it's just like for the majority of the time, I've always dealt with decent cops, decent, but I've also never resisted when I got arrested. I've never been in these scenarios where, don't get me wrong, I was an idiot and said stupid things, but I always knew you have to respect law enforcement, right? Because I've always been on the other side of that law. And no matter what, I was respectful to a point. Don't get me wrong. They knew they knew we didn't like each other when I was in the thick of it. But there's this level of respect that you have to have, regardless.
Was it necessarily that you didn't like each other?
I find out later that it was the pride and ego thing, right? Yeah. Again, when you wrap that around and make that connection, you're just like, because it was real. I did not like him then, but I realized it was when I started working on things, started changing my life, I started changing my perspective. It was like, oh wow, I was the problem. Now they're nice to me, and they text me, when they have a problem in town, like, hey, did your cameras catch anything? Now they come to me for different stuff like that, and it's like a total 180 from what I used to be, and I'm like, and I realized the problem was me. Imagine that. And that's what most of this pride and ego is. You find out in the end when you let go of that, you're like, oh, I was stuck in pride and ego, and I was actually the issue. It says in one of the readings, of NA, it says, until I can take 100% of my account, I'm paraphrasing, until I could accept responsibility for my actions, I was actually creating my own problems. I'm like, oh, okay, so now I'm starting to take accountability for things around me, and it's just like, oh, and now those problems aren't happening, at least the way they used to. You know what I mean? Right. Problems always come. We're going to have plenty of them, but wow, it's such a 180, Yeah. Because dealing with Fred, I mean, he was former law enforcement, right? And he's done nothing but help the community, and I've always looked at things wrong, right? but it takes... There's a certain level that you kind of have to reach and shed, right? Yeah. And you ain't gonna see it until you're ready, right? When the student's ready, the teacher will come, right? And I wasn't ready to learn back then, and I wasn't open to what we said, the spiritual concepts, right? Wasn't ready. Yeah. Right?
Well, sometimes the teacher's always there.
Yeah.
Sure. The teacher's there.
Yeah. When
are we going to become the student?
Yeah, true.
And something we overlook is that we're also teachers.
Yeah. There's I can't remember who said it, but we're all teachers and students at the same time, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Crash.
That wasn't Dave. He didn't fall. Trust me. It was a book. What are you doing to Dave over there?
We're just having fun.
Having a good old time.
We're just having fun. Yeah. The other one that popped up was the independent spirit.
That one I've never heard before.
I haven't either. This type of pride involves an excessive emphasis on self-reliance and a reluctance to accept help or guidance from others.
What was it called again?
Independent spirit.
Independent spirit. Okay.
So this is more the type of pride that I think that we normally look at.
Yeah.
When we do get clean, we start taking an inventory. Oh my gosh, this is who I've become. This is how I act out. And this is why I act out, is because I'm not getting my own way. I want my way, and I want it now.
Yeah.
And it just comes down to the self-centered pride. All I'm thinking about is me, self, I, what I can get, when I can get it, and I want more of it.
It's my money, and I want it now.
And you're not standing in my way because I'm going to get it. Right?
Yeah.
He goes on to say that it can lead to isolation or a refusal to acknowledge one's dependence on God or others.
That God piece. That God piece, though.
It always jumps in there.
You know, I was running laps around Twin Cities Church this morning, right? And I was on, because I learned through COVID, one lap is a half a mile. So you run 2 laps, right? It's a mile. So I ran 2 miles this morning. I haven't ran in a long time. Had an injury on my foot. Long story short, after a run, you got this runner's high, right? And they have this little area.
Releases those endorphins or whatever.
The dolphins, yes. Yeah. The endorphins. Inbred dolphins, yeah, those ones. Yeah. Well, anyways, after I was dealing with the sonar and communicating with these dolphins, right, I ended up going, there's a park right there, and there's this little place, right, and it has a little plaque. And it's a quote, and it says this from Jesus. I can't remember exactly what it says, right? But it's just like, the synopsis was like, seek and you will find, right? Mm-hmm. And so I walk into there, and they have this little stone, and I'm sitting there, and I start praying, right? And I say, and it was kind of funny because I'm like, you know what? I'm never gonna have a burning bush moment, just not. And I started laughing because there's bushes behind me, and I said, well, maybe I won't have a burning bush moment, and then there were sprinklers on at the same, but I'll have a wet bush moment. Because there's a bunch of water just spewing through these bushes, and I'm just like, I thought it was hilarious. Because I didn't even know there was bushes behind me. I wasn't even coherent of it, but I closed my eyes and I started praying, and I was like, man, you know what? I'm never gonna have a burning bush moment. And then I kind of looked behind me, and then there's water spraying in the bush. So, but maybe I'll have a wet bush moment.
I was gonna say, I hope you didn't bring a lighter. I'll do anything for a burning bush moment.
But I thought it was funny because that's the way my higher power works, right? Yeah. It's like, maybe I can't give you a burning bush, but there's a little bit of water on that bush. There you go.
So you don't get a burning bush.
Yeah, just let's keep the fire down to a minimum. This is California. But that being said, I kind of chuckled, right? And I'm like, and for me, that right there was a spiritual moment, right? Okay. As silly as it's sounding, right? I've just kind of laughed. I'm like, my higher power would do that. Like my higher power did to me when I went to, I don't want to say do to me because it sounds a little victimhood, but it was funny when I told my story at the Rebels meeting. Of course my daughter would throw up everywhere right before I go up to throw up to go speak, right? And long story short is there I am going to speak, right? Because the pressure's on, right? The 5-year anniversary, and you go tell your story. It's going to be amazing. And then right before that,
my baby threw up.
That's the most throw up I've ever seen her spew out, dude.
It was horrible,
dude. It was bad. And then the smell, and I'm cleaning it up, and it's in my nostrils, damn near. And they're like, and we got a special treat for you, speaker Frank, blah blah blah. And I'm like, oh, I'm all like cleaning my hands still,
on and cracking.
But it was a good segue. Everybody really enjoyed it because I'm like, hey, just so you all know, if you didn't realize, I'm sure you smell it.
Yeah. So to sum this up, these 4 types of pride, which again are moral self-righteousness, corrective doctrine, achievement, and independent spirit. These 4 types of pride are not mutually exclusive and can often overlap or coexist. Understanding these different manifestations of pride can be helpful in recognizing and addressing its negative effects in one's own life and the lives of others. That's the key.
Yeah.
If we're living in pride, it's not so much how it's affecting us, how are we affecting the people around us? That's the hard stuff, right?
Yeah.
So how to get rid of this false pride. Here's 6 ways to overcome your pride. Be aware. And first, it's awareness. Don't take yourself too seriously. Ask the right questions. If I'm asking questions, that means I'm not better than you.
Yeah.
Okay? Be open-minded. listen and don't talk, and put your business first. I'm not sure what they mean by that.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
But
put your business first.
Those are some things that
maybe it goes back to that procrastination we were talking about.
Very possible. Very possible. But
state your business almost, intentions from the gate. Maybe.
Yeah, we have a tendency to think so much of ourselves, but and not think of others. What are we doing to help others?
Yeah. That was part of my prayer this morning too, because there was other things in that prayer. I was just like, because that's where I was battling that pride and ego, right? Yeah. And just like I know what the cure is. It's getting out of that pride and ego and letting my higher power back in, and that's what my intentions were, right? I went home, I went to the gym and it was closed. They were doing some construction, right? And so I just went to Twin Cities Church, utilized their pull-up bar. Well, it's not a pull-up bar, but I use it as a pull-up bar. Mm-hmm. And then I, ran some laps. Yeah. And by the end of it, I'm like, okay, got to pray and enter, because I know where I need to be spiritually, right? And it's important.
Yeah. Well, the spiritual aspect of this whole thing called recovery is key for. In my opinion, is key to recovery.
Yeah.
Key to spiritual growth. It's when I cut myself off from my higher power, all of a sudden I'm running the show myself.
And you suck at it.
Oh man, it's horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah, me too.
The big book says that a life run on self-will can hardly be a success.
And piggybacking off that, when you start living in God's will, He does such a better job. And I don't just mean the results. I just mean He's doing it for you anyways. Like your higher power, like we think we want a whole bunch of stuff, but it's just like in the end, because if I got everything I really wanted in this world, there'd be...
You destroy it.
Yeah, it's like you think you want it.
Do.
We think, thank God there's a pause between what you want and what you get, because if so, this whole room would be filled with shit that I know I'm not going to use in another month, right?
Well, you can fill up your house. Don't fill up the office.
I'm starting here. I'm like, this is my new storage unit. But you get what I'm saying? Thank God there's the things that you think you want. Then in a year, you're like, thank God I don't have that. Yeah. Because I'm very grateful for the life I do have, that God gave me in spite of all my moaning and groaning about the stuff I thought I wanted, right? And I think that's an important factor to this whole pride and ego, because sometimes we can get lost and stuck in the things that we think we want or the things that we think we need, right? And really... in the end, thank God I didn't get those things. Yeah. Thank God I didn't stay with that chick that I really wanted to be with because she was hot or this or that. Thank God, right? Because I was in toxic stuff, right? And thank God He pulled me out of those situations and brought the people in my life that He knew I needed, like really needed, not like I thought I needed, right? So that being said, you got anything you want to butter up on this biscuit?
Not really. It's just, we just keep chipping away at it one day at a time and try to be the better man today than we were yesterday.
All right, guys. Well, you heard it here on F.D. Recovery. Frank and Dave killing it once again. The dynamic duo. All right, so let's set forward the intention to work on our pride and ego throughout the week, right? Because it can. And also maybe write some stuff down. That's what I think I'm going to try to do. Those situations I'm in, pride and ego, and write down what I'm battling in that pride and ego, right? Yeah. And don't be afraid to drop a comment, questions in the comment box and all that, and like, subscribe, share, all that sweet stuff.
Yeah, I'm a fan of pen to paper.
Pen to paper.
Pen to paper. Don't think it, ink it.
Well, you heard it here. All right, this is FD Recovery. Peace.
Peace out.
Thank you for tuning in to FD Recovery. A reminder, be kind to yourself on this journey of recovery. Also, call your sponsor. Get connected to local support groups. And for one day at a time, stay clean and sober.